Good Thursday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast will join us. We'll talk a little bit about Lamar Jackson contract extension, where that stands, as well as the Browns-Ravens rivalry. But we begin by talking Browns and NFL football with John Fanta. John, earlier today it kind of broke. The NFL is, again, making it very clear. They're not going to mandate that you have to get vaccinated, but you are going to have huge benefits, competitive benefits, the more players that you have vaccinated. Today's message was, during the 18-game season, regular season, the 18 weeks of regular season, if a game cannot be made up as the result of non-vaccinated players testing positive, whichever team has the outbreak of COVID, if it can't be made up, it will go down as a forfeit this year. Also, vaccinated players need 2 negative tests within a 24-hour period to be ramped back in. Non-vaccinated players, 10 days. So the NFL isn't saying you have to go and get vaccinated. They are saying we are going to make sure that players that are vaccinated have some benefits.
The National Football League is following the science, and they have from the start of this, and this news comes as no surprise at all. And so I think that what the NFL is doing is strongly encouraging its players to get the vaccine. At the end of the day, the National Football League is a multi-billion-dollar business. And when you had the amount of postponements, the attendance restrictions, everything that entailed last season, you can't have another season like that. Some businesses could survive a year. The big ones could survive under the strange circumstances for a year. To go beyond that is a different story. And so I totally get what the NFL is saying today and putting it out there, that it would result in a forfeit if you have unvaccinated individuals testing positive for COVID-19. And I think when you look at the television dollars, when you look at butts and seats as well, this is a no-brainer for the NFL to put out there. I think we all saw some sort of variation of this news coming. So I understand where the NFL is coming from. We are all encouraged to go out and get the vaccine. The National Football League is an important voice, not only in sport, but in society. And I think that, like the NFL, we've seen other entities, other major businesses have these types of protocols, just not always with a game on the line. And the NFL is just following suit with that. They followed the science last year. They also, it bears noting, and Cleveland fans had to understand this the hard way. The NFL pushed through in certain times and periods of their season last year. They had the Browns play the New York Jets late in the season when there was a good argument to say maybe this game should not get played. The game got played. The NFL was telling us at the end of last year that they were going to forge on. They did. They had a successful season in a pandemic. They're going to try to go into this year, and they want to make it as normal as possible as the return to normal is happening. And in their minds, without saying it directly because they can't mandate it, they're saying, you should get the vaccine. And there's a reason why Baker Mayfield said earlier this week that the vaccinated teams have an advantage.
Yeah, without question. And again, it's not somebody's right to play in the NFL. It's a privilege to play in the NFL, so the NFL has the right to make the rules. Let's just keep that in mind. All right, we're going to move on. Enough of that. So question was put before ESPN and Tim Hasselbeck on Get Up, ESPN's Get Up. Which of the franchises that have not won the Super Bowl does he think will end the Super Bowl drought? Here's Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN Get Up.
Okay, I don't have to prove this case, but I'm going to say the Cleveland Browns. I know I got a little bit of work to do here to plead my case here. The reason I say it is this. They've done a tremendous job with the talent on their football team, and I get it. It has been a disaster for a really long time. But through some of those bruises and scars, I think they've improved, and I really believe in the coaching staff that they have assembled in Cleveland. I think that the job Kevin Stefanski did in year one, considering what that offseason was remarkable. And if they can get everybody to play around the quarterback at a high level, I think the quarterback's good enough to get it done. So I'm going with Cleveland.
To quote my friend Jalen Rose, say it with your chest. We created this topic on radio yesterday. That's my pick. I agree with you on the Browns.
And there you have it. Those are national guys. They think the Browns roster is there. I can't argue with that thought, John.
You can't argue with it at all. And I think the thing that stands out the most there is Tim Hasselbeck believes in Baker Mayfield. We have seen other national analysts say the Browns have every piece and part available, and they might be able to make it to the AFC Championship regardless of what their quarterback does. But the fact is, Baker Mayfield is going to be the key for the Browns and just how far they go. He's going to have to make that big-time drive happen late in the game. He has plenty of help. The Cleveland Browns have built this roster up as well as any team in the National Football League throughout the offseason, throughout the periods before that. And you have to credit this front office and what they've done. Now, when you have as many new defensive parts as Cleveland has, the question is, how do all those parts come together to form a unit that vastly improves from last year? That is the question that has to be answered. There is no doubt in my mind, provided they stay healthy, that the Cleveland Browns offense should be a top 5 offense in the National Football League. Really, they should be. They have every weapon. They have the best offensive line. They have a quarterback who only continues to get better. So my biggest takeaway there is not that the Browns can win a championship and end the drought. My takeaway is Tim Hasselbeck in the midst, because Dave Bacon, you and I have had this discussion throughout the recent weeks where some national analysts have something to say about Baker Mayfield. Tim Hasselbeck made it clear. He believes in Baker Mayfield. And that's why Baker Mayfield is going to have a contract extension at some point coming his way, because he delivered this franchise a playoff win, something that they've been greatly searching for many years. I think that he's going to build on that this upcoming year. And there is no question that when you look at the Browns on paper, when you look at John Johnson, Troy Hill, Anthony Walker, a seasoned veteran from Indianapolis, Jadeveon Clowney, the Cleveland Browns have made acquisitions that say they are trying to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And they're not going to come out and say that, but I agree that's what they're doing. Pro Football Focus ranked the running back groups, so the running back units. Browns number 1, Colts number 2, Saints number 3, Vikings 4, and Cowboys 5. The 1-2 punch of Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and you got a couple of interesting pieces in addition to that, but the Browns' best running back unit in the NFL. I agree. Your thoughts on that, John?
I do agree, because Nick Chubb could be argued as the best running back in the game when he's at 100%. And when you consider the fact that Kareem Hunt is the other end of that elite tandem, Cleveland has the perfect mix. They've got sugar and spice in their backfield. That's how good Chubb and Hunt are, and they play off one another so well. I am fascinated in training camp to see what the Browns do here at this number 3 running back spot, because Dearness Johnson has shown us capabilities. Demetric Felton is someone who's getting a lot of buzz for his ability to catch the football. He set a UCLA record for receptions as a running back in his time over in Westwood. So there's no question that the Browns running backs are one of the best groups in the league. To be ranked number 1 by PFF, it says a lot. It also says a lot about your number 1 ranked offensive line that PFF has already posted weeks ago. Look, the other takeaway I have in these rankings is Indianapolis is going to be a really interesting team in the AFC. I think that they're going to win the AFC South, a division that, let's face it, is a little bit softer. It just is. And I'm not buying Tennessee based on some of the things that I've seen with their roster over the offseason. I think they're still a good football team, but I'm buying the Indianapolis Colts more. And I think that the Colts are going to be a formidable team this upcoming season. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with Carson Wentz. But that running back group, I mean, Jonathan Taylor showed us a lot. And Indy's got some interesting position players. But there's no question. Cleveland should be a consensus top 3 to 5 team in this category. And it speaks volumes that PFF, a source that relies on the metrics, ranks Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt right at the top.
So dogpounddaily.com poses this question. If the Rams call about Kareem Hunt, should the Browns listen? My answer is no. And I'd put a little bit of a disclaimer that I won't say in front of it. You know, hell no, I wouldn't listen.
Hell no. I agree with you. I'll put the disclaimer in there too. This is Sports4CLE. We could say that.
Exactly.
You know what? I'm in favor of that as well. I don't think that the Cleveland Browns should be trying to mess up a great thing. If it ain't broke in the NFL, don't fix it. You don't know. You do not know what exactly you have beyond Nick Chubb if you don't have Kareem Hunt. You know, with Kareem Hunt, you have a versatile back who, if Chubb were to go down hurt, you would have a fitting replacement. The Browns would have to get a really incredible haul if they're going to trade away Kareem Hunt, who they have signed on to that extension. They made a commitment to Kareem Hunt, and rightly so. I think Kareem Hunt is happy in Cleveland. I think the Browns are happy with Kareem Hunt. In the NFL, running back play is something that can come and go in 2021. You do not want to mess up a good thing. You've got a good thing going. You've got a championship team. I'm not saying that a Kareem Hunt trade ruins anything, but you have two terrific options. I call them sugar and spice because I mean it. They really play off one another well. I think both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt would tell you. They've even said it before. They elevate one another. Why mess up a room that is number 1 by Pro Football Focus? If the Rams call, I'm sending it to voicemail.
John Fanta and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll take a look at what some of the national people think will be the sequence of the Browns' contract extensions, plus second-year player that could break out top 15 as far as all the NFL. Browns have one of those top 15. Tell you who that is on the other side of the break. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. We can continue talking Browns football with John Fanta. And John, take a listen to this. Ian Rappaport from NFL Now has this to say about Baker Mayfield and the contract extensions with the Browns.
I think what the Cleveland Browns are doing, they really have 3 core players that are sort of up for contract extensions that I know they've had at least some level of discussions on. Baker Mayfield is one. The quarterback always takes the attention. Nick Chubb, the star running back, is another. Then Denzel Ward, their standout corner, is another. My read on the situation, and this really has been something, I would say it's been consistent since the season ended, it's a little more of a wait-and-see approach on Baker Mayfield. Not that the Browns want to see what they have. I'm just saying there's some other quarterback contracts that will probably get done first. I wouldn't be surprised, based on what I know, if it's Baker Mayfield next offseason and the Browns kind of focus their contract talks on Chubb and on Ward this season. Just a little more manageable, and having a little more information on the quarterback is never a bad thing. It's not like Baker is urgent and needs a deal right now either. That's probably how I see it playing out. So Baker being patient for his contract, probably a good thing and a positive read on the situation for the quarterback.
And, John, I think the other thing that goes into that is if he has the type of year you and I think he's going to have, he's going to make himself some more money, and the Browns will gladly write that check.
They gladly will write the check. And if you're Baker Mayfield, you are patient and taking the approach of, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to continue to prove it to you. The fact is, the Browns and Baker Mayfield could reach something before this upcoming season. And there's been rumors floated out there. There's been talks that a deal could have gotten done or would get done before the 2021 season kicks off. The Browns economically could end up benefiting from that. Now, he's the quarterback. It takes priority. And it's interesting to hear Ian Rappaport say that Cleveland may take a look at the market in terms of you might see some other deals get done. That might impact the way that the Browns go about the Baker Mayfield extension, which feels inevitable. But for both sides here heading into this season, if you're Baker Mayfield, you're only going to probably increase your value. We all see this. Everybody's at a consensus. The Cleveland Browns are going to be a pretty good football team this upcoming year. If Baker Mayfield is hurting his value at all, it would really surprise me when you consider the fact that now he's got a familiarity with Kevin Stefanski and he has every weapon around him. So the wait and see game for Baker Mayfield, you're only going to be able to leverage it for more dollars. So I could see the patience approach and why it can pay off.
Yeah, without question. All right, we're going to change the topic slightly. ESPN comes up with second-year breakout candidates in the NFL. There's 15 of them in the entire league. Number 1, Joe Burrow, quarterback for the Bengals. Number 2, Jerry Jeudy, really good wide receiver for the Broncos. Number 3, Ezra Cleveland from the Minnesota Vikings. Number 7 on the list, this is my Browns second-year breakout player, Jedrick Wills, left tackle.
I like that choice, and I think for Jedrick Wills, taking over at left tackle and being able to pass block and do the things that entail. Remember, Jedrick Wills had to transition to that left tackle spot. There were a lot of high expectations. He had to manage through those, and Jedrick Wills managed them in a solid way. But when you look at some of the metrics and who he can be and the ceiling for him, there's no question that Jedrick Wills, the plan is for him to be the left tackle for the Cleveland Browns for the next decade. And he showed us as a rookie that he can be that guy, but I think you're only going to see him become a better pass blocker on the left side and continue to be a very strong run blocker. So he is a fitting second-year breakout player. The other guy that I would have on there is Donovan Peoples-Jones. Maybe he's not in the top 15 across the league, but he wouldn't be far away from that because I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be someone on this Browns team who greatly benefits because of the amount of weapons that Cleveland has and because Peoples-Jones proved last season he could catch the football and do a lot of things with it. That touchdown catch and run in Tennessee, the key touchdown in the win in Cincinnati. Look, Joe Burrow should be at the top of that list. He's as obvious of a choice as there is, but I think it is a very nice job there by the national pundits for having Jedrick Wills as high as number 7 because Jedrick Wills working with those 4 other guys is only going to rise, and it's why the Cleveland Browns selected him in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I'll say about you mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones, that's a big target in the red zone for Baker Mayfield as well. That will be a big advantage for him. John Fanta and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Nate Burleson has some thoughts about Odell Beckham Jr.'s return. You're going to want to hear the former Brown and NFL wide receiver and what he thinks. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. We continue talking Browns football on NFL Network's Good Morning Football. Nate Burleson, former Brown and NFL player, had this to say about Odell Beckham and how he expects him to come back this year.
I don't like to share too many text messages on the show just because, I keep conversations private. But I just remember a couple of months ago, I reached out to OBJ. I was just sitting back watching some football, and I was like, I wonder how he's doing. So we were tapping in with each other, and I said, yo, how you feeling? How's the body? And he said, on the way. And I said, is the body back? He said, all signs pointing up, all capital letters, and he finished with God is good. Sent me a little clip of him working out that he didn't share on social media, and I was like, oh, man. And I told him straight up, your body looks stronger. Yeah. You look faster. You look more explosive. I haven't even seen him like this up till this point. And they say after an ACL injury, which I've had, you come back stronger. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, yes, I believe he is going to add an element to this squad. And it's not just about his route running. We know when he's at the top of his game, it's elite, period. But it's that X factor, the special trick plays that they add into the game plan.
And let's bring John Fanta back in. And, John, when you look at that, there's a lot of things that you can do with the skill set of Odell Beckham Jr. when he's healthy.
You're talking about a two-time All-Pro, a former NFL Rookie of the Year. You're talking about someone who changes the way a game is played. OBJ is as explosive of a player in the National Football League when he is on the field and locked in. He secured a win for the Browns in Dallas last year, a very important win for that team's mentality going forward, a game that they were heading towards unraveling and losing in deflating fashion, and Odell Beckham Jr. put the game in his hands and made the key plays. Listening to all the things that Nate Burleson just said. Nate Burleson, someone who I have a lot of respect for. I think he's one of the stars in NFL coverage today. There is a clear takeaway to all those things, and that is that Odell Beckham Jr. is out to prove himself this upcoming season, as he should. You take the amount of negative talk that he's had to listen to the last 10 months. You hear about how you keep Baker Mayfield from being Baker Mayfield's best. You can't be around a winning situation. You're not a winning player. You only care about yourself. It bears noting, we all, or at least we, Dave and I, watched the Browns-Bengals game on Thursday Night Football there when the Browns had to win that game. Week 2, after a deflating loss to the Ravens, the Browns did win that game. And did we not see, were my eyes mistaken? Did we not see OBJ, Jarvis Landry, and Baker Mayfield on the bench? They didn't know that the cameras were on them. There's a synergy. There's a chemistry. And Odell Beckham's playing with his best friend, Jarvis Landry. And to me, there has not been a time where at least I've said Odell Beckham is bad for the Cleveland Browns. I think it's a stale, lazy take. It is, as a result of him being a New York Giant and things not working out. And let's face it, the Giants had a whole lot of other issues happening at the time. It's a no-excuses league. You got to make things happen. But I think Odell Beckham Jr. is tired of hearing why he can't and is ready to be a part of the winning solution. He now is around winning. He's around a leader in Kevin Stefanski. He's still around his best friend, Jarvis Landry. And he's around a quarterback who is going through his third offensive scheme in a matter of 4 years. Let's pump the brakes before we take down Odell Beckham Jr. here. And for those who are, it's stale, it's lazy. Nate Burleson talking about what OBJ said to him speaks volumes.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with this. Guys that have the talent and the skill sets of Odell Beckham Jr. say they want the ball because they're convinced the ball in his hands gives his team the best opportunity to win. That's why he wants the ball. It's not because he's looking at numbers. He's convinced ball in my hand means we have the best chance to win. Period. I mean, so we're going to move on. All right. Malik Jackson is a guy that the Browns brought in to kind of help shore up the interior of that line. And Malik's getting after it. We go to his social media and we take a look, trying to drill and get himself healthy and right. Take a look at Malik Jackson. John, I think if Malik Jackson is healthy, he gives the Browns some of that interior defense that some folks are concerned about. I think he could be better than what they had a year ago, which wasn't terrible inside.
No, it wasn't terrible inside. Let's start with that here. You can't totally blame the Browns' interior, their defensive line. And you would also hope that with the Browns being better in their linebacker core, being better in pass coverage, it will create a confidence around this unit. But for Malik Jackson, you're talking about a Super Bowl champion. You're talking about a former Pro Bowler. The Browns have brought in winning players. And Malik Jackson is no joke. I mean, this is someone who has shown a good sample size of being a solid tackler, of being someone who can get to the passer. He's someone who has racked up 35 sacks in his career and nearly 270 tackles. And what I look at with this defensive line is how much do these guys elevate each other's numbers as a result of playing with one another? That's the hope with Jadeveon Clowney. Why can't it be the hope with Malik Jackson too? Malik Jackson doesn't carry the name or the notoriety maybe that Clowney carries, because Clowney's kind of had a larger-than-life type figure since his South Carolina days. So for me, Malik Jackson is someone who, just as much as Clowney's going to add something, he's just as important of a pickup because, Dave, we could have seen the interior of the defensive line not be in place heading into this year, and the Browns just counting on some youth to serve role there. And, it'll be okay because they got Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. That wasn't good enough for Andrew Berry. He's made the key signings, and Malik Jackson is another. And I can't tell you, that social media video, that's exactly what I want to see in the month of July from a player. I expect big things.
I would agree. And so that kind of goes into our next point, which Bleacher Report identifies the biggest hole on every roster heading into training camp. And for the Browns, they say defensive tackle. Now, there's Malik Jackson, who, granted, was banged up, wasn't 100%. Andrew Billings, who opted out, he's pretty good. Elliott, who's a young guy. So I get that there's question marks. I don't necessarily know that I would call it a hole, because it's not like you're relying on one or two guys. You've got 4 or 5, and you're going to sort it out.
I think that they see Sheldon Richardson. I think that they see some other departures, and they say, well, we got to pick somewhere that's a hole. This Cleveland Browns team, I've been on this show and have said the Browns don't have a hole. And I don't think that defensive line, defensive tackle, the interior of their line is a hole. Malik Jackson is a good player. Yes, he was banged up, but he's a good player. And the expectation is, and this word's come out of Berea, that Andrew Billings, had he been a part of the equation last year, we might have thought this defensive line is even better than it was. So there's every expectation. Like, I haven't heard one sign that Billings is not going to make an impact or that Billings is going the wrong direction. The Browns even said during last season, man, we are excited to have Billings in the fold. The interior of the defensive line should not be an area that you consider a hole. If you want to bring up a hole, you could say special teams, because there is an unknown. There have been concerns with the kicker situation, and there have been concerns with special teams in general, whether it be coverage, whatever it might be. So if you want to create a hole, that would be it, because it has been a question mark area for the Cleveland Browns. I have no questions that the defensive line is going to be fine, particularly at defensive tackle. I think those guys are going to be A-okay. You would have been able to convince me more by saying that you still had question marks about linebackers being a hole, only because you're expecting Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to be a guy that's in coverage for you and doing a good job. but right off the bat as a rookie. But do I think defensive tackle as a whole? I disagree with that.
So before we take a break, Browns Nation poses the question, should the Browns be interested in Geno Atkins? Again, it's defensive tackle coming off an injury, only played 8 games a year ago. Really good player. I guess my question would be, what's the price?
Yeah, what is the price? If it comes at a friendly type of financial situation, then maybe the Browns look into bringing in Geno Atkins. There's always, unfortunately, and I'm knocking on wood here in this room. I'm telling you, I'm knocking on it. Look, this is the NFL. Things happen. Stuff happens. You could think of the word, Browns fans, of what has happened during training camp before. So it's good to have Geno Atkins in mind. That being said, Geno Atkins, has he seen the best days of his playing career? And what's he going to give you? What's he going to give you for the price that you are paying is the question that you want to ask. I think it's the same question that the Los Angeles Rams are dealing with right now, because they're looking at veteran running backs, trying to figure out who could give them that replacement option, at least for now, a temporary one, to Cam Akers. Do the Browns need a Geno Atkins? The answer to that question is no. If it makes sense for them and they're dealing with some banged up guys in training camp, every team has to evaluate these types of options. But should they do it now? I'm going to answer no, because I have faith that the interior of the defensive line is in a solid spot.
John Fanta and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, 5 surprising roster decisions the Browns could make. This is according to Dog Pound Daily. We're step aside, take one more time out. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. We continue talking Browns football with John Fanta here on Sports4CLE. Well, we've showed you some Nick Chubb video. Nick Chubb continues to get after it. Take a look at him in the weight room again. Yeah, John, he's throwing around a small sports car in the weight room these days. It's easy to see why he runs by and through people.
I think I just heard all of Cleveland say collectively, "That's my running back." Like those are the 4 words that come to mind as I'm watching that, because my goodness gracious, this man is truly that, a man. And his leadership, while done in a soft-spoken nature, really resonates. He is so respected. I mean, have you ever heard, we talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo this week winning an NBA championship. Have you ever heard anything say a bad thing about Nick Chubb? No. He puts his head down. He works his tail off. He does his job to a T. And from the moment that he's gotten to Cleveland, he has embraced the city, the fan base, and being a Cleveland Brown. So I see him working, and it comes as no surprise, because Nick Chubb, when he was drafted, on his draft night, the take was, not sure about that knee. Dealt with knee issues at Georgia. It's almost like that those knee issues and the doubts that came with him were the best thing that happened to him. How often do we see that on NFL draft night, when a player drops as a result of some potential injuries and the risks that could come down the road? The fact is, the shelf life on NFL running backs isn't what it was. But Nick Chubb's a throwback back. And in a league that's so pass-oriented and every defense is trying to adjust to be pass-oriented, Nick Chubb forces your hand for an opposing defense to say, we better be physical or else this guy's going to run over us, as he is capable of lifting a sports car, like you just said.
All right, so 5 surprising roster decisions the Browns could make. I'm going to break it into 3 and 2. They've got trade Chris Hubbard, keep 10 offensive linemen, and then keep only 5 wide receivers. Let's deal with that. Any way you can see just 5 wide receivers on this roster?
No, I don't see that. I don't see just 5 wide receivers. I mean, you look at Landry, Beckham, Peoples-Jones, Higgins, and then a couple of the other guys that you have coming into the organization or holdovers from last year, and there's more than just 5. I think that you're looking at, if the Browns are going with their wide receiver core, it's got to be more than 5. 5 is not going to cap it. I think it at least is going to be a 6-man unit. Keeping 10 offensive linemen, as you just said, well, I don't know if the Browns need to necessarily do that, and I'm curious to see what exactly they end up doing with their offensive line. But I'm not sure if I see that either. And then the other one that you brought up is Chris Hubbard. Well, you have to see what kind of value Chris Hubbard is going to take. If you were to trade him, what value is he going to come at? That value could change in the weeks leading up to the season. Chris Hubbard can be a reliable starting offensive lineman for a team. Yep. So the Browns could look into that. I think that we will see Andrew Berry and this front office attempt to stay aggressive as this preseason continues, and Chris Hubbard might be a guy that's on the move. But of the surprising roster decisions that the Browns could make, do I actually think that any of those 3 are going to occur? I really don't, which is why I would be surprised. The one that seems unrealistic is the wide receivers one, Dave, right? Because you look at the sheer options this team has, to only carry 5 would be very odd.
Yeah, there's like 7 that you go, because the ones you mentioned, you had JoJo Natson, you had Anthony Schwartz, you had Cordero Hodge. Yeah, and so those are all kind of interesting. All right, the last 2, keep 10 defensive linemen or keep only 4 linebackers. And if they're going to play a base of 2 linebackers, maybe, but the challenge there is you're going to have some linebackers that are going to probably be your special teams guys, and that's why I think you probably keep at least 5 of them.
You probably do. You keep more than 4 linebackers. The defensive lineman is an interesting one because of the strength at the top of that core. So maybe I don't know if the Browns have the need for all of that depth on their defensive line. I think that the Browns are set in a good position with their defensive line. I don't see a team only keeping 4 linebackers. Even if you are in that predicament where you say we're only going to keep 4, we're going to try to gamble elsewhere. Look, there could be a time when you really regret that decision in a game. And even if you're playing the 2 linebacker system that you're talking about, where you prioritize the secondary more, there's still some problems that you run into. So I think that all these scenarios are interesting, but I think it's unlikely that the Browns only keep 4 linebackers. I think they're going to have 5 linebackers. I think they're going to have more than 5 wide receivers. The defensive lineman take, I don't really see it at all because I think that the Browns are stacked at the top there, and I think that they feel pretty good about where they're at with their defensive line.
John Fanta, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, John.
Dave, I'm going to go watch that Nick Chubb video again.
All right, John Fanta, have a good one. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift our focus to who the Browns are battling in the AFC North Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast joins us to talk some Ravens-Browns rivalry. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Sports for CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Baltimore Ravens, one of those teams that the Browns are going to be battling in the AFC North, and we welcome in Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. Spencer, appreciate the time very much. Is there any update on Lamar Jackson and that extension that everybody knows is going to happen with the Ravens and Lamar? But has there been any talk as you get closer to training camp?
There haven't been any current updates on the situation. It's continued, and it feels like maybe we're getting a little bit of a three-man standoff again further with Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson. It just feels like, especially with Mayfield and Allen, who are both represented by traditional NFLPA agents, that neither one of them is going to want to budge, and they're probably waiting to see if the Ravens can get Lamar Jackson signed and see what his contract situation is without an agent. And, you anticipate his contract, he's going to be saving 3%, which is probably about actually 2%, as he will probably have a lawyer look over his contract, and that comes at a small fee. But Jackson is going to get a small bit of savings there, a little chunk of savings for not using an agent. So it feels like maybe Allen and Mayfield are waiting on Jackson and seeing if Jackson is ready. And the Ravens have cleanly expressed their desire to sign him and bring him in and make sure that he's going to be the quarterback for, I would think, at least the next 4 years following this season. So ultimately the Ravens are in a good spot, but it's been rumored that they want to get something done before training camp. And I would think that there's a strong possibility that by the end of training camp, there is a deal struck, as Lamar is back in Baltimore and he just arrived today. So you think that maybe they put things on ice and waited for him to arrive, and then they can kind of go back to working on timelines and the nitty-gritty details and speaking with him and what he wants to do. So it feels like it is imminent, but no real updates other than that Lamar has landed in Baltimore and is back at the facility. So it feels like that increases the likelihood of something happening here in the coming days, weeks, or months. And
the key there is he's representing himself. So him being back at the facility gives him the ability to do that. And the flip side of that is you pretty much want to get that done before you start playing games, because he is his own representation as well. You want him focused on football once it starts to get into the dog days of the season.
Absolutely. And he does have mentors and advisors and things of that nature, but he just doesn't have the NFLPA registered representation that will allow him to strike a deal and negotiate. So no one that is on his team is allowed to negotiate on his behalf for an NFL contract. You must be licensed to do so. So that is the current situation, but he's able to relay information to his advisors and things like that. So he's definitely not alone, but doesn't have the traditional representation that the NFL recommends. And a lot of athletes in the NFL are looking for him, as a quarterback, especially in a record-breaking deal. It'll definitely be the largest deal in Ravens history and probably one of the 3 to 5 biggest in the NFL right now and possibly ever. So it's an ongoing situation where players are looking at him to maybe break the mold a little bit and disrupt and see how that turns out and what kind of deal is struck. And if it's, creative or unique the way that maybe Patrick Mahomes was, his deal was. So it's an interesting situation on many, many fronts, and I'm sure that we'll get some updates in probably the next 10 to 12 days.
Do you expect this offense to look a little different? Every year it seems like it's evolved a little bit. Do you expect some new wrinkles in it? And also, there were some concerns about the line, and you took us through it last time you were on. Who has kind of jumped out at that line as well? So wrinkles into the offense, and then take me into the line as well.
Yeah, so the offense might be moving forward by looking to the past. And you look at the 2019 season, they had a Hall of Fame caliber right guard, Marshall Yanda. A lot of people think that he'll be in the Hall, within the next 5 to 10 years, possibly even a first ballot Hall of Famer. And when you lose someone like that, then you go and replace him with a rookie, Tyree Phillips, who was a right tackle at Mississippi State. They move him inside, which was very rare for him to be starting week 1. The Ravens typically do not start offensive linemen in week 1 of their rookie season. I think the only one in the last decade is actually Ronnie Stanley, and he was a top 10 pick. So a little bit different case there. So the Ravens' interior offensive line was really not capable of running much downhill blocking concepts in terms of inside zone concepts or duo concepts where you can line up, hat on a hat, and go ask your man to block downhill. And they missed Marshall Yanda a lot. Matt Skura was coming off of a 3-tear knee situation, kind of the perfect storm of a knee tear. And then at left guard, they had Bradley Bozeman, who now will be playing center. But Bozeman is a very mobile, nimble, technically sound guard, but he's not an imposing force as a guard in terms of power or down blocking or things like that. So it was really an inability to pound the rock downhill last year. Towards the end of the season, when the Ravens went on a run to make the postseason, they ultimately had to start using concepts that kind of avoided the offensive line. They used a ton of power and pulling and trying to create mismatches by pulling and using Pat Ricard, and they were without Nick Boyle, which was a big loss for them as well. So they ended up using, empty concepts where J.K. Dobbins would be in motion from the slot and he would run across Lamar Jackson, and it would be a veer or something of the sort where they could just kind of avoid the interior offensive line in the run game. And now they bring in Kevin Zeitler. They draft Ben Cleveland, who's a 6'6", 357-pound guard who runs under a 5.0 40 and is, a prolific weight room and incredibly strong force. And then they kick Bradley Bozeman. Maybe the biggest change of the offensive line is kicking Bradley Bozeman from left guard to center, where in the past they had Matt Skura and Patrick McCarry and some other guys that were smaller sort of finesse players. Now Bozeman is 6'5", 320 pounds. He wasn't huge for a guard, but now he's a more imposing center than they've had in the past. So you think that you're going to see a lot more of those inside zone concepts and those downhill running concepts. At the same time, of course, Sammy Watkins, Rashad Bateman, Tylan Wallace brought in to help over the middle of the field, take some pressure off of Mark Andrews to be able to make some plays on the outside. They have not had a capable receiver in terms of separation or strength, getting off of press, playing through contact or getting yards after the catch. And you look at Bateman, you look at Watkins to come in and be able to do that immediately. So they want to use those guys to spread the field out and attack a little bit deeper on the perimeter, take some pressure off of Mark Andrews. And suddenly you have Marquise Brown with a lot of pressure off of him. You're able to use him in a role where he can go in motion a lot and be a decoy a lot and work over the middle of the field. And it feels like he does succeed from the slot a little bit better, where he can work over the middle of the field and find some soft spots and run after the catch and do some things like that. So definitely big changes for the Ravens offense, and hoping it's similar to 2019 in terms of their offensive line play and better than we've seen in the Lamar Jackson tenure in terms of what their outside receivers can do.
Tell me a little bit about J.K. Dobbins. A lot expected of him, and you mentioned Bozeman has been pretty good. Everybody expects him to really take off at that center spot. Take me through those two facets of this offense.
Yeah, so the Ravens struggled with snap consistency a lot last year with Bozeman. None of the centers that they've had have been college centers. Bozeman played at Alabama there, won national championships, and was a rock solid figure there. And he's got the muscle memory. He seems very confident in that ability to just simply snap the ball. And like I said, will provide more power. J.K. Dobbins is, to the Ravens, an ascending superstar as a running back. Last year, he, was near the tops of the NFL in yards per carry. He has outstanding contact balance. And where the Ravens are really looking for him to take off is in the passing game, where at Ohio State, he actually spent 11% of his snaps out wide or in the slot, split out in a receiver alignment. So in college, you would see J.K. Dobbins running some smash concepts and running actual route, 2-man route and 3-man route combinations with wide receivers and looking the part. And in training camp last year, and again in OTAs this year, he's been able to go up and sky above some linebackers and make plays above the rim and do some things in the pass game. Last year, he had a couple of struggles. Checking down might be one of Lamar Jackson's biggest weaknesses. He tends to avoid taking those, low-hanging fruits from the tree at times, and instead will opt to, extend a play a little bit, which can turn out being a home run or turn out being, an incompletion or a sack or something of the sort. So I think a big progression is going to be dumping the ball off to J.K. Dobbins and letting him go get yards after the catch. And that's a missing element from the Ravens offense last year and the year before is yak. So for J.K. Dobbins to get, 20 to 30 receptions this year would be enlightening, I think, for this offense, and allow them to work the defense, make the defense account for checkdowns a little bit more, open things up. All of a sudden, the lanes for Lamar Jackson to run through are better. Suddenly there's less clog over the middle of the field for them to throw to, and that allows the Ravens to have more room to operate, the receivers to have more room to operate, more soft spots in zone, which the Ravens face more than any team in the NFL because of Jackson's running ability. You can't really turn your back to him in man coverage. So J.K. Dobbins taking a leap forward in that sense is huge, and as well as just being able to handle a larger workload alongside Gus Edwards with Mark Ingram out of the equation now, and they're counting on Dobbins to be, a really dynamic 10-plus touchdown, 200-plus touch back. So it's going to be a little bit of a step forward for him, and it feels like he has shown nothing other than the ability to be an impact player and a guy that you can rely on to take over games when you need him to.
Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll flip sides of the ball. We'll hear some about that Ravens defense. We'll also talk Ravens-Browns rivalry. It is growing. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with it.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens? Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
We continue talking about the Browns and the Ravens with Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. Spencer, the Ravens lost a lot of big-name guys on that defensive side of the ball. Who are some names that are really stepping up and going to be big contributors for the Ravens on the defensive side of the ball this year?
Well, the first name you're looking at to step up in a position that feels a little more uncertain than it has in years past is Tyus Bowser. Bowser was recently extended for 4 years, around $22 million, which was a shockingly low figure when you're looking at what the going rate of young, capable outside linebackers in the NFL is. Bowser is a perfect fit as a Sam linebacker, which Matt Judon was previously occupying, the linebacker that can cover, that can rush the passer, beat up on tight ends a little bit, and set the edge in the run game. Setting the edge in the run game is something that prevented him from taking a lot of snaps over his first 2 seasons, but he has profoundly improved in terms of his hand placement and his ability to control the line of scrimmage and get off of blocks and make tackles. Then he also is arguably, in my opinion, he might be the best on ball or on the line of scrimmage coverage linebacker in the NFL. He was targeted 10 times last year. He allowed 5 receptions for 49 yards, and all 5 of the incompletions were by his action. It was 3 interceptions and 2 passes defended. He had some outstanding reps. There's reps of him against Kareem Hunt, one-on-one on a little bit of a blaze out route, him able to break across Kareem Hunt's face and snack the ball away and make a pass defend. And then there's also examples of him spot dropping in zone coverage where he's able to go intercept Ryan Tannehill over the middle of the field by bluffing a blitz. And he does the same thing to Baker Mayfield in that primetime shootout against the Browns late in the season. So Bowser is an ascending player still. He's a player that doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body. He doesn't have a ton of sack production necessarily, but because the Ravens blitz in such a diverse and complex way at times and they overload pressure, there's not a lot of reps of him truly pinning his ears back and getting after it off the snap and rushing directly upfield in a penetrating manner like a TJ Watt or like another outside linebacker that doesn't have as much coverage responsibility. It's called low gear when a player comes off the ball and they kind of remain balanced off the snap and they analyze, is this a run? Is this a pass? They might have some edge responsibility in terms of contain or some coverage responsibility. But when he did pin his ears back, he was able to get pressure. He was second on the Ravens in pressures last year. So he has a well-rounded, versatile game. Is he going to be this all-pro player? It feels like probably not, but he could be, a Pro Bowl kind of guy that ends up with more pass rushes. He was only 70th among edge defenders in pass rushes last year with a little over 200. And like I said, a lot of those weren't true pass rush snaps. But if you tweak that up to, 400, 450 pass rushes, he could easily be an 8-9 sack guy who can match up on running backs and match up on tight ends and do some different things for you. So the Ravens are depending on Tyus Bowser to be worthwhile and be able to replicate some of what Matt Judon did and able to really lock down that Sam linebacker position. And, the group otherwise is consisting of Odafe Owe, who's an unproven rookie that's only been playing football for 6 years, Pernell McPhee, who's an aging veteran. They have Dalen Hayes, they drafted out of Notre Dame, basically to be Tyus Bowser's backup. It feels like at that Sam position. Then they have Jalen Ferguson, who, if he falters, I would anticipate the Ravens to make a move if they're not confident in him, maybe for a Justin Houston, or as the Ravens have done the last couple of years at the trade deadline and going after another, proven kind of pass rusher on a team that's struggling like they did last year with Yannick Ngakoue towards the deadline or something of the sort. So that's kind of the most uncertain starting position on the Ravens right now, defensively. And then you look to their safety depth. That definitely is a big area of concern. You've got 2 guys you're confident in, Chuck Clark, Deshaun Elliott, who are pretty interchangeable. Clark plays a lot more up towards the line of scrimmage, but they certainly change roles. Elliott is kind of the single high guy at times, and Wink Martindale is very cautious, especially early in the year, sticking him 15, 18 yards back all the way on Mars, basically, to prevent anything deep after the loss of Earl Thomas. So I think they would tinker there a little bit, but beyond that, they just don't have a ton of depth. So that's an area I'd look for them to make some moves potentially. When you look at the AFC North, a lot of people think, Ravens probably deserve to be the favorite because they've won it a number of times. Browns right there with them. Do you sense Ravens fans kind of, think the same way? That's what the thinking in Cleveland is, Ravens and Browns are going to be battling for the North, and it's pretty even. How do Ravens fans view the division now? Yeah, I think the Ravens fans anticipate it's going to be a dogfight, pun intended, between them and the Browns. You don't think that it's going to be easy to, go sweep the Browns again. The Ravens took the Browns by force in week 1. The Ravens are under John Harbaugh are arguably the best week 1 team in the NFL. He always has them very prepared in September, and then they start to falter in October a little bit. And then Harbaugh gets the ship right by December, where they're one of the best teams in football in his tenure as well. So not being able to play the Browns early feels like a little bit of a disadvantage, with Kevin Stefanski only being in year 2. That big blowout last year was definitely a result of a new head coach and a very limited offseason, but you saw the Browns improve leaps and bounds as the season went on. They got really hot towards the end of the year there, and ultimately with the reinforcements they've brought in the secondary and John Johnson and getting Grant Delpit back and Greedy Williams healthy and Denzel Ward potentially healthy and of course, Ronnie Harrison, it feels like they're much more capable on the back end. So the Ravens fans are anticipating a better defense. The Browns defense simply wasn't up to par last year, and you're going to see them fighting at the top. I mean, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt mixed with that very strong 5-man front. The offensive line for the Browns is going to present some problems, and Baker Mayfield has shown escapability and a ton of ability to make plays after the initial play and extend plays. So they put up a 41-point fight against the Ravens the last time they played, and I think that the Ravens are looking at the Browns definitely the most seriously that they have in probably the history of the two teams being together in the AFC North, as the Browns have experience, they have talent on both sides of the ball, they have good depth, they have plenty of offensive weapons and all of that good stuff. So if Baker Mayfield can continue to progress within that system, which is a very similar system to what the Vikings run, and if he can be a little bit more of a mobile Kirk Cousins type and a little bit more turnover cautious with the football, then the Browns are a serious threat. And I think it's a pretty even fight to who's going to make it out of that division in terms of winning it and getting the home game and potentially a bye in the playoffs. And then, the Steelers are still in the mix, of course. They'll never fully die, especially when Ben Roethlisberger is behind center, even though his arm has definitely depreciated over time. But it feels like definitely a two-horse race at the top with the Steelers fighting to be a wild card team. So it's going to be an interesting time in the AFC North. And the Bengals feel like they're capable of surprising some people and maybe fighting to be towards a 500 team. So it looks like the AFC North might be among the top 2 or 3 strongest divisions, and the Browns and the Ravens are definitely the biggest reasons why.
Spencer Schultz, it should be a whole lot of fun with the Browns, Steelers, and Ravens this season, all being very, very good. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. You are welcome back on Sports4CLE anytime. Again, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Thank you. Have a great day, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, again, Spencer Schultz from the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. That'll do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We'll be back again tomorrow. The D-Man, Dennis Maniloff, Kevin Arnold, scheduled guests. We will see you then. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 4.